back again, me and Eric talking about mental health in the private sector from your transition in law enforcement. And Eric, appreciate everything that you've been saying here. And I really want to start talking more about now that you've landed the role or people are in role, what can they expect and what kind of things should they be thinking about? What kind of challenges will they have, do you think, in their kind of everyday work in the private sector? And we don't just because we change uniforms doesn't mean we left all that behind. That stays with us. That's who we are. It's part of our identity. It's maybe part of who we were, I should say, and we're trying to be better every day. But what's been your experience there?
Um, honestly, the post transition is sometimes even more difficult than the actual transition, um, because now you have to learn how to live with yourself on a day in and day out basis in this new role. And for me, it was about having a routine. You know, um, you know, that's why, and I'll pivot really quickly. That's why I hate working remotely, to be honest, is there's no separation between work and home for me. And
Yeah,
one of the things that I love the most about my commute, if you can love a commute, is I was able to like kind of mentally prepare myself for the day and for the work on my ride in. And then on my ride home, no matter what happened that day, it was my way to decompress and
yeah,
ready to transition and shift into home mode, into husband mode, into father, you know, mode, and to just leave the work stuff behind. And there's not really a way to do that with remote work that I found yet. But that's neither here nor there. Um, so that was important to me is having that routine, having that and being intentional about that drive and that commute and saying, okay, this is my time to prepare. This is my time to talk over a presentation. This is my time to decompress, etc. But also taking breaks throughout the day. Like it's
yeah,
weird. You go in the corporate sector and you're no longer, riding a beat or riding a desk or something like that. And you have all this freedom and all this discretion to go get a bite and go work out, go walk around, and it can be weird, but sticking to a routine and sticking to what you're doing every day and having some sort of consistency and some sort of stability can really help. And that really helped my mental growth as well as my mental healing was okay, I'm doing this. I have breaks, and I have some structure to my day. Second thing was, conversations that you would have with coworkers where you didn't agree. You know,
yeah,
you don't have it necessarily a tool belt that you can go to for people you don't, necessarily disagree with or agree with, but some of the same tools that you learn in law enforcement are applicable in the private sector. Like de-escalation, verbal
sure,
judo.
yeah,
It's a different target, but it's the same mentality. It's to prevent something from escalating. It's to prevent something from going further or going off the deep end. And the fact that we have those tools and we receive such constant training on them, and that we're utilizing them on such a daily basis over a myriad of diverse circumstances, it really puts us in a unique opportunity to employ them in the corporate sector.
yeah,
Because you are going to have disagreements, you are going to have attitude problems with certain people, you are going to strongly disagree with certain people's viewpoints and stuff like that. And knowing how to de escalate, knowing how to articulate your thoughts and how to talk people down or even talk yourself down, how to step away, all of that is hugely helpful, and can really benefit your mental health as you transition into a new role.
yeah. I
So,
think we're so
yeah,
used to like sometimes when force comes our way, we're used to just going force on force.
right.
They picked up a gun, you pick up a gun, you transition from your taser, you go to guns,
Yeah.
right? Things like the terminology, the mindset, the forward-leaning mindset of being on the offensive, because being on the defensive is it's hard to recover, right? And that's so ingrained into our psyche, not wanting to lose ground or not wanting to lose on a position. So now you're much more collaborative, right? You've learned,
Hmm.
but was that something that you automatically were like, oh no, I'm in the corporate sector now, I'm more collaborative, or did you have to learn that over time, like literally
So
everything
I've
else?
I've always been collaborative. I mean, even in law enforcement, I was extremely collaborative. But it's a different type of collaborative.
Mhm.
And it's a different mentality. It's a different goal in your mind of, okay, what's the end goal of being collaborative in this setting? Because in law enforcement, I was 110% intense all the time, and I didn't know how to shut it off. Even when I was on my personal time, I was 110% intense,
I can't see that
and
about you at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
110%? No
you
way.
know, and that and when I transitioned into my first corporate role, I didn't magically lose that intensity. I again, that was the benefit of having a prior law enforcement guy as my supervisor. Is during some of our one-on-ones and our meetings, he was like, "Hey, man, you got to tone down that intensity." And he was like, and he was good because he gave me specific examples. He said,
Mm.
when you were talking to so and so, I could just tell from your body language and the tone of your voice that you were used to like being on a traffic stop, and you were bladed, and you had your hands in a certain way, and you were talking to that person as if they were going to fight you and not asking your problem on helping a solution or something like that. And he said, I don't think you knew what you were doing. It's just automatic. And he said we see that all the time, and people notice. People who are not law enforcement, they notice that type of stance. They notice that type of mentality and that intensity, and it can be a
They don't
really,
understand why,
yeah,
but
they
they
don't
notice
understand
for
why,
sure.
and they notice. And so he said, so that was hugely helpful to me to not only be self-aware of some of the issues that I was bringing to the table that I was not aware of, but also how to mitigate some of that in an environment that didn't call for
Yeah.
and so my wife, she likes to pick fun of me sometimes because she's like, you're far less intense now than you were, 8 years ago. And, I take that as a compliment because it took me a long time to stop being that intense and to stop treating everyone either consciously or subconsciously as the enemy or as someone who could potentially hurt me, you know?
Right.
And that was one of the things that I struggled with significantly in my first role. But by the end of that role, I was in a much better place to be able to say, okay, I'm going to give this guy a break. I may not like A, B, C, and D about him, but I'm going to give him a break. I'm going to work with him. I'm going to, work professionally with him. I'm going to have a good conversation with him. And if I can't, then I'm just going to stay away from him. And I'm going to be very careful in what I say to him. I'm going to be very careful in how I articulate things around him. And um, again, it's a mindset.
Yeah,
You
being
know,
mindful. Yeah,
yeah,
being
it's not
aware.
something that you learn overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes practice and it may not be, we talk a lot about your first job out of law enforcement. It may not be your last job. More than likely, you're going to have a
Right.
series of roles, and that's all good. That's healthy. And for me, I came from a task force environment, and so I was fluent in trying to understand what everybody's perspective is. The big difference for me, though, was end goal. In law enforcement, our end goal was take down the cartel, take down the bad guy, whatever it was. And in the private sector, even though you might be on a committee of some sort, the end goal may not be the same for everyone.
Right.
Let's say we're on a travel security committee and you've got people from safety and you've got people from HR and procurement and all these different organizations. If you don't understand individually kind of what their goal is to be on this organization, and it could be something as simple as, I just want to keep our traveling employees safe.
Right.
Awesome. Make that how you communicate with them. But I think you brought up some really great points about being self-aware and soliciting that feedback. It's something I'm working on as well is solicited and sometimes unsolicited feedback, and not being hypersensitive to, well, why is somebody telling me that I did this wrong? Don't you know who I am? I've done investigations, blah blah blah. That's
Right.
sometimes even my mind goes to that, and but it's okay. We're all working on it. We're all on this journey together. We're all struggling together. Um, I'll give you the last word though, brother. What helped you after you transitioned and you're in the private sector? What's the one thing that you held on to that is helping you the most, kind of on the daily in a daily basis?
Well, it's that's an easy answer, Scott. It's you and others that I made a
I
connection
knew
with
that.
early on. You know, um, I was very intentional about reaching out to people who had made the transition successfully because I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I wanted to mitigate some of the negatives. I wanted to be as successful as I could. And I don't know what I don't know. And people who have made that transition before, there's all sorts of tips and tricks and knowledge that you accumulate from your mistakes and your experience in transitioning that other people just don't have access to. And that's the whole purpose of not only these podcasts, but networking in general is to not only see other people's perspective, but hopefully mitigate some potential mistakes that you may make in the transition or that you may make in life. And I remember talking to you on multiple occasions, talking to others as well, and saying, how did you do it? And what are some of the pitfalls that you discovered? And how did you get past them? And that was hugely helpful to me. It was encouraging to me. It was a balm on my wounded heart, so to speak.
Yeah.
Because I was talking to someone who understood where I was coming from, who understood me and understood my background and the challenges that I was having. And that's just not something that can be taken for granted. And so that's what I really try to instill in people that I now invest in and build into, is you're not alone and we're all here. We're a community. We were a community in law enforcement, and now we're a community of people after law enforcement, and that hasn't changed. And if you think about it in that respect and think about it as a family, I have gained so many friends, good friends, people that I have met in person, people that I've been to lunch with, people that I've talked on the phone with on numerous occasions, who I never would have known, most likely, had I not been intentional about seeking out those answers and collaborating.
Yeah. It's a great place to leave it. I really appreciate you being vulnerable. We need more people like you out there in the private sector to guide others, myself included, to where you are and what you're doing, and keep us appraised of that. Keep us, let us know how that's going with you, what kind of things you're learning, because that's going to be so much more helpful to people who are transitioning than those of us who have transitioned. It never goes away. It's something that we'll always wear with us, are the things that we experience in law enforcement. And but what we can do is we can try to be better people to those around us. And I love how you said that early on in earlier posts. So thank you, Eric. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for being vulnerable, and thank you
Yeah.
for sharing. I know it's not easy, but it is so important for you and for us to hear that. So I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Scott. I
All
appreciate
right,
you.
buddy.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.